Good morning. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Livingstone Range School Division, November 28th, 2022. Call the meeting to order at 9:31. Could we have Trustee Yeagas give us the acknowledgement of land, please?
Okay. Welcome to our division office located on the traditional land and territory of the Nississipi, Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, the Blackfoot people, within the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Thank you, Trustee Yeagas. And now, would we stand and face the flag for the national anthem, please? Have someone please make a motion to accept. Okay. Recommendation that the November 28th, 2022 consent agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as moved by, okay. Trustee Yeagas. Thank you. Is there anything that anyone would like to add to the agenda at this time? None? Seeing none? Sorry? All those in favor? Approved. Do we need approval of the minutes? All right. Do we need business arising from minutes? All right. Is there any professional learning? Anyone applying for any PD? Okay. Yeah. Are there any emergent changes to the agenda? November 28th, 2022 regular board meeting agenda. Anybody have any emergent changes? Have a motion then? Trustee Toon? All those in favor? Declaration of conflict of interest. That the Board of Trustees declare if they have any conflicts of interest relating to agenda items from the November 28th, 2022 board meeting. If so, they should declare them at this time. Are there any conflicts of interest? All right. Our first action item, Métis Nation Education Service Agreement. LRSD has approximately 45 self-identified Métis students attending our schools. As a result of ongoing efforts to support First Nation Métis and Inuit children, as well as to provide professional development to increase the capacity of staff. Administration has explored the possibility of support from Rupert's Land Institute and the Métis Nation. Mr. Richard Feller, Associate Superintendent, will present the proposed education service agreement with the Métis Nation for board approval. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the education service agreement with Rupert's Land Institute and the Métis Nation for the 2022-2023 school year. Would someone like to make that recommendation? Trustee Hodges. Mr. Feller, would you like to speak to this, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure working with Rupert's Land Institute over the past few years. They provided us with a lot of professional development and supporting the work that our teachers and our staff do for our students. We've also been fortunate enough to have Joël Gamache working with Rupert's Land over the past couple of years in Train the Trainer format, where he goes up, works with that team, and is able to bring back that learning to our school division. We've noted over the past few years that we've been doing a really good job of meeting the needs of our First Nation population in the work that we do, but we've also recognized a need to do more for our Métis students. So this will give us an opportunity as a school jurisdiction to have a real connection with our Métis community. One of the things that I think is important to note is that within this structure, it's about the relationship that we have with Rupert's Land through the Métis Nation. Rupert's Land has worked with elders throughout Alberta, Métis elders throughout Alberta, to ensure that all of the programming that they would provide has been vetted through that traditional process. So if we go through the educational service agreement, it's really about that we recognize that to achieve educational success, Métis learners need to see themselves reflected in the education system. As well, learning about Métis culture and identity is important for Métis children and for all children in the public education system. I would like to go through just to the guiding principles that the parties recognize that the relationship established through this Métis Nation Education Service Agreement is a step towards meeting the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action for reconciliation. The Métis Nation of Alberta, pursuant to its jurisdiction over Métis educational matters, has the authority and the responsibility for the oversight of education for Métis students and to ensure all Métis students have access to and receive quality education. The Métis Nation of Alberta has charged Rupert's Land Institute with the mandate of education, including primary and secondary education, kindergarten to grade 12. So that's the piece that is really important for us, is that the Métis Nation has charged Rupert's Land with the responsibility. The parties agree that the board, senior staff, division staff, principals, vice principals, teachers, and support staff have a responsibility to understand the history, culture, and worldview of the Métis people in order to support the educational needs of Métis children and to build a more informed society of learners. Really, the purpose is that we are in relationship. And through that, we affirm this and strengthen the relationship between the parties. We confirm the commitment of the parties to meet the guiding principles and objectives of this agreement, set out the roles and responsibilities of the parties to meet the funding allocation and the service provisions detailed in the agreement, and stipulate the terms and conditions under which the board will provide funding. The objectives are to empower educators to develop and apply foundational knowledge about the Métis as outlined in Alberta Ed's Leadership Quality Standard and Teacher Quality Standard. Fulfilling the aims of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit grant as laid out in Alberta's Education Funding Manual for School Authorities, and to assist to provide system, program, and instructional supports that improve educational outcomes for First Nation, Métis, Inuit students and support the implementation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations. supporting the education of Métis students by fostering a welcoming and understanding environment, helping Métis students on the journey of learning about Métis identity and culture, and building a Métis community of support. Finally, improving education on Métis history, culture, and worldview for all Alberta students, with the inclusion of Métis-specific resources at all levels throughout classrooms and curricula. And I think this is the important piece for us, is within that relationship is to be able to get that support through Rupert's Land. And so I would leave that to you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Superintendent Feller. Trustee Hodges, would you like to comment?
Thank you. This is great. I think this has been a long time coming, and so I appreciate the partnership and everything I'm excited to see it move forward in our school division, and I'm so glad that we took the step to initiate this and do this, because I think that the Métis population has just been growing and growing in our school division, and so it's great to have that, to be able to work with them and have this service agreement.
Any other discussion? Tune?
Thank you. No, echo what Trustee Hodges says. Appreciate all the work that went into this. I know that from the updates that this has been a long process, and really thorough work's been done on this, and really hopeful for the benefit this brings to all our students across the division, but also the hope that this helps show the collaboration and the prospect of the other service agreements. I know that those have been in place in the works for a long time, but really appreciate that, seeing how our LRSD and our administration strives to make sure that we're leaders in this. We don't wait for things like this to be mandated upon us, that they seek out these things. I think that really speaks highly how they value those relationships and those partnerships. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Trustee Yegas?
Yeah, I'd like to say the same thing. Thank you very much for all the work you've done with this service agreement. It's been a long time coming. This is done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. Any other discussion? Trustee Hodges, would you like to close?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Then we'll vote. All those in favor? Passed. Before we started the meeting, I should have clarified why the vice chair, myself, Gregory Long, is doing the meeting. Chair Lacey Poitras couldn't make it today, so she is online listening in. Item E1. Item E2. The Audit Committee will present information related to the recently completed audit and from the draft audited financial statements for the period ending August 31st, 2022. That the Board of Trustees approve the audited financial statements for Livingstone Range School Division for the period ending August 31st, 2022. Would somebody like to make that recommendation? Trustee Hodges. And Trustee Hodges, because we hear from you, please.
Thank you. Okay, So the audit committee met on the 24th of November. And so we had the report this is the report as of the end of August 31st, 2022. It represents 100% of the fiscal year and 100% of the school year. We met with the auditors, KPMG, like I said, November 24th. Members of the audit committee in attendance were myself, Lori Hodges, Trustee Lacey Poitras, our board chair, Trustee Carla Gimber, renamed you, sorry. And we had one public member with us this time, Martha Radcliffe. Unfortunately, our other public member was unable to attend. And we also had Mr. Jeff Perry and Mr. I wanted to say Jordan Gunderson. Sorry, I always have to think about that because I want to call him Anthony. We had our presentation by the auditors for the financial statements of the Livingstone Range School Division. We conducted our audit. They conducted their audit in accordance with the Canadian Generally Accepted Auditing Standards. They are independent from the school division with the ethical requirements that are relevant to our audit of the financial statements. And our management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. The objectives are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free of material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error, and to issue an auditor's report that includes our opinion. We had a presentation from the auditors, and in their opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects. The financial position of the Livingstone Range School Division was as August 31st, 2022, and its results of operations, its remeasure gains and losses, and its cash flows for the year. Then ended in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. The audit committee, the auditors went through their 360 review documents, focused on audit findings, the financial statements, and the financial statements notes with the committee. The audit committee spent time with the auditors freely asking specific questions in relation to the financial information findings and their presentation. Our findings and their presentation, management gave full access to the books and records. Auditors were not limited in their ability to complete a full audit, and management was continue to work on policies and procedures in the area of school-generated funds. I'm now going to return it over to Mr. Jeff Perry for the summary of the financial statements.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Hodges. The first thing I'll do is speak to the management point that she referred to in the previous slide with regards to the continued efforts within the school-generated funds area. So there has been some progress in that area. This is a point that was on the management letter in the prior year, and there has been some progress with regards to minimizing the amount of cash that we have on hand or that we collect out at the schools. You're never going to fully get rid of that, but we have tools to move closer to being at a higher percentage of online payments where there's less cash being handled at the school level. There's also progress towards completing a handbook in that area. We had a transition in our Director of Finance position during the year, which threw that off a little bit with our prior Director of Finance moving to a different position and the hiring of Jordan. So we're grateful to have him, and he'll continue the progress with regards to that point. So I will, like Trustee Hodges said, a lot of time was spent with the auditors going over the financial statements, and so they have been audited. Mr. Jordan Gunderson, who's here with us today, did the majority of the work in the preparation of the financial statements. So when they refer to management preparing the financial statements, we actually receive a document from Alberta Education, and so the template we utilize for the financial statements is created by Alberta Education. We don't have any leeway as far as presenting in a different manner, and so the financial statements that will be posted on our website subsequent to the approval by the board are available to the public, and they can access them there in the manner that Alberta Education has provided us. So I will go through the results on a overall scope. Like I said, the audit committee went through in detail the financial statements. The overall financial position of the jurisdiction, you can see in this table, you can see the columns of 2022, which is the year that we just currently completed, compared to 2021. And so at the very bottom, the net assets, which is the amalgamation of the operating reserves, capital reserves, invested intangible capital assets, and unrestricted surplus, if there is any, quantify the total net assets or the ownership of the jurisdiction. So it went from 13.1 million in 2021 down to 12.8 million in 2022. So there's just over a 300,000 decrease in the overall net assets of the jurisdiction. And that's broken down by the following areas: financial assets, which represent the cash, accounts receivable, investments. So those are your assets that are somewhat more temporary. And so you can see there was a significant decrease in the cash and so forth. And the majority of that decrease is from the investment in capital, as well as fewer accounts payable at the end of the year, meaning we had paid the majority of the payables at the end of the year versus in the prior year where they weren't. Liabilities are the things that you owe, so the accounts payable. Unearned revenue or deferred revenue, so dollars that we've received but we are required to use them for certain reasons, went down as well. And so much of that is coming from the deferred revenue where we invested in capital from those dollars. For a net financial assets of 4.9 million, which is 0.2 million less than what it was in the prior year. Non-financial capital assets is your capital assets, so your tangible buildings, equipment, vehicles, and prepaids is in this line. And so the net of what the cost of the capital assets and what's been amortized along with prepaid is 50.9, which is a decline from the prior year as well, because there was more amortization than there was in purchasing and invested in capital. Deferred capital contributions, unamortized revenues. These are funds that we received from the provincial government to build school buildings. And we recognize the revenue at the same time that we recognize the amortization. So there's a net zero impact on the bottom line. But here is the amount that still is yet to be amortized in revenue and on the expense side of 43 million, which is down from 44.6. Again, getting to that overall decline of about 300,000 to 12.8 million. Any questions? If there's any questions on any of these, I'll just let you raise your hand, speak up, interrupt me. I'll keep going until that. So like I said, it represents a financial position, decrease in the financial position of 300,000. This was a planned deficit in order to utilize operating reserves in the prior year as we work toward the required threshold instituted by the Minister of Education, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the overall deficit is a smaller deficit than what was actually planned, and we'll go through some of those reasons for that as well. But the fact that we had a deficit of 300,000, it was planned. Typically, you're not going to. It's not a good thing to go into a deficit unless you've planned to do that. And in this case, in order to use some of our operating reserves, we have to go into a deficit, and so the provincial government allows for that. Okay, so here's the financial statements, the statement of operations. So when we look at the overall revenues, we're just slightly under 54 million in revenues. That's 100.87% of the budget, meaning that we had more revenues than what we actually had budgeted in the budget. In expenditures, we had 54.3 million in expenditures, which is 98.7% of the budget. So you can see if you're going to have more revenues and less expenditures, the deficit that was originally planned, which was the 1.488 million, is not going to be as significant. So there's a difference of 1.1 million in the result of that. So as we go through some of the reasons as to why, here's some of the revenues. So that 0.87 represented 465,000 in higher revenues. Of that, Alberta Education is 537, meaning there was some decreases in other areas. But the Alberta Education, during the year, we received $195,000 in learning disruption funding. We also received, which was not anticipated, $332,000 in WMA 2021 payable that was not required to be paid back. So in the prior year, our enrollment projections were lower than what we actually had been funded for. And so the government required us to set up a payable of $332,000. And then in the following year, they said, you don't have to pay that back. So there was a lot of confusion as to whether that needed to be paid back or not needed to be paid back. And so we did not budget for it to be paid back. We were on the conservative side. And then found out in the following year that it did not need to be required to be paid back. So it was converted into revenue. Summer school, we anticipated that Alberta Education would fund differently, and that was not the case. And so we had less funding for the summer school than we anticipated. WMA for this year, our enrollment was higher than we actually budgeted for. And so we set up a receivable from the provincial government of $185,000, and that means that's an increase in revenue. We also received this year fuel subsidy, $107,000, which was not budgeted, unanticipated until it was announced mid-year. And we utilized some of the deferred revenue that we had in Innovation and First Nations Education Grant during the year to support areas in that program. So Alberta Infrastructure, these are some smaller amounts, was 67,000 less than what was budgeted. That just means that amortization was less, so the Alberta Infrastructure revenue was less. And we're budgeting in May, and yet there's still time left in the year where we anticipated additional capital, such as buses, and we weren't able to purchase them, and so the amortization for this year was lower than we anticipated. Federal revenue was $68,000 more, so this is the First Nation funding, and for the most part there was a few more students, and the calculated rate, which is finalized at a later date, was slightly higher than what we anticipated. Fees were $453,000 lower. For the most part, that was school-generated funds out at the school level. Sales and services was $432,000 higher. International program of that was $295,000. Pre-K higher anticipated. Pre-K was part of that as well. Investment in income was $47,000 higher. Midway through the year, the interest rates started to increase, and so we received higher than what we had budgeted there. And in the areas of donations and fundraising, it was lower than what we had budgeted, but when you look at those numbers, the percentage of what those actually represent is quite small. So actually, I'm going to go back. That's the overall revenue. So again, the net of all of that meant that we had $465,000 higher. And in some of these areas, I mean, when you look at learning disruption, additional expenditures were put in place to accommodate the funding that we received for learning disruption within the elementary grades that it was for. And fuel subsidy was obviously utilized for the gas increase in price and so forth. Okay, I'll jump into the expenditures. So the overall expenditures, so the percentage under 100% represented about $715,000 less spent than what we anticipated. A good portion of that will, again, less revenue was collected in school-generated funds, less expenditures in school-generated funds. It almost offsets one another. But we'll look at the beginning. We're actually higher in our teacher salary and benefits. Additional staff were hired throughout the year for contextual reasons. Our support staff was actually almost right on where we anticipated or had budgeted. for the year. Even though we added additional staff for contextual reasons, not all positions did we have the ability to hire right when we anticipated that, and so there was some positions that were left open and not filled. When we look at the maintenance department, that's one area where we did not fill a couple positions, and so that actually decreased our support staff area, even though we increased in other areas to almost neutral out. Contract services and supplies, which is a significant portion of the budget. We can go through those really quick. Contracted services was lower than we anticipated. Transportation initiatives that we intended to do are not getting completed until now. A lot of it due to timeline of when we could actually procure those initiatives and the things that go along with those. Our utilities were significantly higher than we had anticipated, and I think that is reflective of society in general, that utilities went up significantly. Professional development was under. IMR, which is just an in and out thing, was under in that area. Travel and subsistence was under. Amortization was under. We talked about that in the revenue side of thing. Contracted services in this area, that's the wrong title. It was over by 59, but I'll have to clarify what that is. 49,000 in repairs and maintenance under, and under in insurance from what we budgeted. So the net of all that is $715,000 underspent, which is the main reason why our deficit is not as significant as we anticipated it. So the overall impact on our net assets, and this is breaking it down into the different areas. So it identifies the opening for each of those areas. Invested in capital assets is dollars that we've expended in capital assets. So that's our buses, our non-funded facilities, our equipment such as copiers or mowers and things of that nature. So this represents the unamortized portion of what we've expended in that area. And so the opening balance for that was $7.5 million. It decreased by $177,000, meaning that we amortized and we did not have the ability to purchase additional buses that we anticipated. And so it actually has a decrease in that area down to $7.4 million. And that represents about 13.61% of our operating budget. Unrestricted, we don't have anything in it. Operating reserves, we started with 3.7 million. That decreased by 441,000. The majority of that is the operating deficit, and then some of that is capital that we expended from operating reserves. And that decreases the operating reserves to 3.3 million. And that 3.3 million is reflective of a 6.08% of our operating expenditures. Capital reserves started at 1.8 million. There was an increase of 311,000, and again, that is for capital that we were unable to expend on, just because we couldn't procure it in the time frame that we tried. Just for an example, buses that we ordered are taking over a year to get into. In fact, we still don't have them, and we ordered them over a year and a half ago. So the manufacturing of buses and us having the ability to get them is challenging, and so that has increased to 2.12 million. The other component of that is dollars that are amortized for this building. So we've been in this building a few years now, right? There's the need to allow for amortization to increase the capital reserve so that we have the ability to deal with any major roofing projects or things of that nature that we need to do in this building, and a good chunk of that is that as well. Funded buildings do not fall under this area. Funded buildings are treated differently, and so they're deferred revenue, deferred capital contributions, and then they're amortized. So that doesn't fall into here. When I talk about facilities, I'm talking about the non-funded, which for the most part, this building's one of the only buildings that we're still amortizing in that area. So the question that I know is always going to come to the table. The minister announced for the upcoming budget where we need to be within a certain threshold, and when we do the calculation, that's at about 4.38% with regards to operating reserves. So we're talking about this column right here, and we're currently at 6.08. We do have a budget that's reflective of getting us within that threshold, and so we'll continue forward monitoring this budget and making decisions as such to ensure that we're within that threshold, or we put together a proposal to the minister to transition over a longer period of time based on a proposal to them. And so that's something that we'll have to look at here shortly as we go and look at the first quarter with the audit committee. So, just for additional information, we talked about the investment in capital. 2 million of that $2.5 million invested is from CMR, IMR, the Stavely Modular, and then a small component of the Peaks campus. 150,000 was equipment, school equipment, lawnmowers, signage, and 300,000 was spent in vehicles, buses, and trailers. So in the 299,000 that we expended, we purchased the white buses that are in a pilot project in 2 of our locations, and we had the ability to purchase 1 yellow bus. We had 4 or 5 additional yellow buses on order that did not arrive during the year, and we still haven't received them. So we anticipate, hopefully prior to the end of the calendar year, we'll have those buses in the current year. So that is additional information, and then I'll just, if there's any questions, I'll take those, but this is just the motion that's been put on the table by the recommendation from the audit committee. And so, Mr. Vice Chair, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take some.
Thank you, Superintendent Perry. Do we have any questions from trustees? Does Trustee Poitras have a way to present questions?
Hi,
She can
Trustee
hear
Poitras
you.
here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment on this. The audit was very well done. We spent a lot of time going over it. And we also have, as we do every time, the ability to sit alone with the auditors without any of the employees in the room. And they were very impressed with our auditing team, with both Jeff and Jordan. And we were able to ask them questions, and we just feel very confident in putting this forward. We went through it in detail, and there were a few things that we were unsure of or didn't fully understand, and we were able to ask questions and get clarity on those. And I just wanted to thank our auditors for coming in and for sharing their opinion with us, and also for Mr. Perry, and I don't know if Mr. Gunderson is in the room, but also thank him for the hard work that they did and giving us the ability to understand the financials and do what's best for every student every day. I really feel that with this audit, we're showing that we are doing that. So I just wanted to share that and thank those gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair Poitras. Any other comments? Trustee Toon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions. First is with the note from the management letter on the audit this year. Are you confident that with the continuation of what has already been started, that it will not appear on subsequent audits? Would be the first question.
And that's a good question, because a lot of what they're talking about is the ability to segregate some of the duties. We're a small jurisdiction, and so we sometimes have individuals in our schools doing multiple tasks. And so we are continuing to move towards a cashless system, which would eliminate many of those concerns. They even recognize to the audit committee that this might be a challenge for small jurisdictions like ourselves to fully get away from it, but I'm hopeful with the things that we do that it won't be a management letter point continued, right? So just recognizing that there are some small inherent risks associated with operating smaller jurisdictions, and we're aware of that. They didn't find any issues with anything going on. They just felt that they needed to say that because of the scenario. So hopeful, yes.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate the hard work that administration does with the finances. We're in such a positive position here in this jurisdiction of being accountable for all the dollars that are spent throughout, and really doing, I feel, a lot of innovative things to help maximize dollars across the division to make sure that no matter what location you're at, we're getting the best value for the dollars we get from the government. Question would be, with all the unforeseen things we've seen the last couple years coming in, that have made it so we're not expending the dollars, and it's great to have additional dollars, but we know that this is a crunch year, and you touched on that. What additional things will be in place to ensure that we are expending the dollars this year that we plan to, because we know with an election year there might be a loosening of the purse strings and we might get additional dollars, and we don't want to be in this position a year from now where we're seeing that we had hopefully got additional dollars but we didn't spend the ones that we had planned on.
Yeah, we're continuing to monitor the budget and make timely decisions with regards to where we are with the budget. The biggest challenge for us, honestly, is the fact that mid-year revenue is announced. We already have additional revenue for the current year that the government's announced that we didn't have budgeted for, right? And sometimes when it's related to staffing, it's hard to fill those positions in a mid-year term and expend all the dollars. So that may be one of the reasons that we may have to look at requesting to the minister for an additional, time period to transition. But we will, in the short term, bring more information in December with regards to the first quarterly report as to where we are as far as monitoring and what our plans are in order to maintain the budget that we currently have. So that's what we're doing, and we'll bring that to the board in the December board meeting.
I appreciate that feedback, because I think that's something that we as a board can advocate to the minister, the challenges that presents when educationally we're getting increases at a time when it's hard to either fulfill those things. You mentioned staffing, but also busing. You can order buses, but because of supply chain issues, we're not receiving those, so those dollars aren't getting spent. But I really, again, appreciate the focus on spending today's dollars on today's kids and all the things you guys do to maximize the dollars throughout the division. Thank you.
Any other trustees? Trustee Agus?
This isn't a question, but I'd just like to thank the audit committee and everybody else who was for this financial statement, audited statement. Good job, good explanations, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Trustee Hodges, would you like to close some comments to your motion? Make some closing comments.
Thank you. I just want to echo what everybody else said, and thank you for the questions. We definitely do want to keep an eye on monitoring the budget, and so the audit committee does an excellent job in doing that, and our management team presenting as well with all the information. It was really good to be able to go over everything. So right now we just have a recommendation on the floor that the Board of Trustees approve the audited financial statements for Livingstone Range School Division for the period of ending August 31, 2022.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. Chair Poitras, do you have a way to vote?
I can raise my hand, but it might be easier if you just ask if there's any opposed. But if you want to vote in favor, I can find a way to raise my hand. I just don't want to appear as though I'm not voting in favor of something if I can't get to my button. So, but I'm okay verbally saying that I'm in favor of this audit.
Thank you very much. All those in
You're
favor?
welcome.
Carried. something wrong?
No, you could just ask it. Any opposed, and then she wouldn't have to raise her hand.
Oh.
All good. You're doing good.
Item E4. Trustee Toon? Item E3, sorry. IMR results and plan. One of a school jurisdiction's highest priorities regarding their school facilities is to ensure that health, safety, and essential upgrading needs, including emergent projects, are completed as required. IMR funding is provided to meet these needs and eliminate deferred maintenance. IMR funding is only provided for government-owned facilities and is not provided for privately owned buildings. To deal with emergent projects as they arise, school jurisdictions should consider setting aside contingency funding. IMR funding may be spent only for approved purposes. Jurisdictions may use the funds to ensure school facilities meet all regulatory requirements, particularly as they pertain to provide a safe and healthy learning environment. Preserve and improve the quality of the learning environment by replacing building components that have failed, prolonging the life of the facility through planned proactive replacement of major components, and upgrading of the educational areas to meet program requirement. Meet the facility requirements of students with special needs. And lastly, replace or upgrade building components to improve energy conservation and efficiency and to achieve cost savings as a result. The report was prepared by Greg Gorzitsa, Coordinator of Facilities. The report shows what was planned and completed in the 2021-22 school year, and then provides a plan for the 22-23 school year. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the 2022-2023 infrastructure maintenance and renewal expenditure plan as presented. Do we have a mover? Trustee Yegus, thank you. Trustee Yegus, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would like to turn this over to Mr. Perry, please.
No. Mr. Kosicka?
Yeah, I'll start off, and then if Mr. Gursitsa has anything he wants to add, he's here to answer all your questions because he knows in detail kind of the projects that are ongoing within the jurisdiction. But I appreciate Vice Chair Long reading through that information because it gives a good context of what we receive IMR dollars for and the utilization and the many things that go into maintaining a facility and the planning that goes ahead. I'll just highlight a few areas. We have two reports. We'll go to the other one first. Yeah, thanks. So the infrastructure maintenance and renewal 2021-22 results. So you'll notice that there's some expenditures in some areas and a blank in some. As we get into it, it's challenging in a couple of ways. First of all, things may be more costly than what we originally anticipated, or even getting the materials nowadays to complete some of these projects is challenging. And so even though there will be some things on this plan, some of those things were not completed in the year. You'll also find that other things come up during the year that become more of a priority for the jurisdictions and things that we need to complete. And so in order to stay within the, excuse me, in order to stay within the budget, revisions have to be made. So if you look at the overall bottom of this document, maybe Nikki, you can, okay. So the actual expenditures for the year were $354 million, and that's from September to the end of August. The planned amount for that year was 1.588, so we were just slightly under what was originally planned for the overall expenditures for last year. So those are the things that I wanted to note. You can see by going through that they're broken up by school, as well as at the bottom there's some divisional areas that are focused that we have to buy supplies for all the schools at one time, and so it ends up going into a divisional line. On the right of the amount, you can see which items are completed and which ones continue to be open, and so we provided that information just so you're aware of those things. So we'll maybe just open it up, Mr. Chair, and see if there's any questions in relation to this particular results from the prior year, and then we'll go on to the plan for the next year.
Am I allowed to ask about something specific?
It depends. No, just
Greg, about 5 years ago, my memory's still that good. I had coaches, if you remember, concerned about the exterior lighting at CCHS when they were leaving at night in the wintertime in the dark. And I see that I noticed when I was reading through this that there are more upgrades to the exterior lighting. Can you tell me what that is?
I believe they added some pole lights out there, as well as some around back. I think they added some just wall-mounted lights. So I think that's basically, it's just some controls left. I think that need to be added. So it's basically, I think it's pretty much done. Great.
I wasn't aware of that, and I was at a dinner 2 weeks ago, and I got a pat on the back for the work that's done on the lighting, and I can't take that. That's on you, so thank you very much.
Yeah. No, I think it was, like I say, we were just doing some control issues maybe, and maybe see if we needed to add any more. But overall, I think it should worked out good, I think.
The coaches are happy with what's happening.
Okay, no, that's good to hear.
Other trustees have questions? Trustee Poitras, pipe up if you do. Okay, anyone else?
I do have a question, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I was just wondering, as you work on these projects and completing them, is your biggest challenge just the amount of time in the day and also the amount of staff we have? How many staff do we have in the overall maintenance team? And when you're getting these projects done, is that an issue? Just that we just don't have enough people, or do you find that all the projects that you set out to do in the year were able to get done?
We're definitely not able to complete most of, or some of these projects. We contract out some of the stuff that we do because we are such short-staffed. There's the bigger projects we have to contract out, like some of these electrical projects and lighting retrofits. We definitely in-house don't have enough manpower to do that. We are still short-staffed as far as I can tell for some projects, and the guys are just slowly catching up on stuff that they are trying to do. We're trying to do last summer, so they have several work orders that they like smaller stuff that doesn't include the IMR stuff. So they're working hard to catch back up on some of that stuff. So I think once we get caught up on that stuff, we'll be able to tell better if we can get on some of these IMR projects and carry on with some of those, and hopefully complete some of them. Like we said, manpower and supplies was an issue, always is. Just more so the last couple of years, but we're working hard to get some of them done.
I know that supplies have been a big issue, and we've been hearing that also. So thank you for that and sharing with us. I wasn't aware that we were contracting out as much, so that's good to know that we have that ability as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Chair Poitras. Trustee Yeages, would you like to make some closing remarks? Oh,
We have to speak about the plan yet.
okay. My apologies.
No worries, thanks. Okay, Nikki, if you want to bring the plan up. So for the most part, because like you see on the results document that many of the projects remain open. They've potentially been started and remain open. We've gone through them and identified the ones that are ongoing, the ones that may be too much to deal with at this time, and we've summarized in this plan what we feel is doable in the current year. Again, contingent upon many of the things that we already talked about. And so with that, I think it follows the same template. We don't identify what our estimate is on each line by line item, just because that's an estimate, and whether it's under or over, we don't really want to debate that. The overall intention is to, if you want to go down to the bottom of the document, is to spend around the $1.1 million in IMR. So just for your information as well, we get about $600,000, $628,000 a year in IMR. So the reason that we are spending more than that is because we have IMR dollars that we've not spent in the past, and so they're deferred. The number underneath that is just over $1 million, which is where we feel that we need to have in deferred revenue in order to respond to emergent items that might come up during the year. So if there's a significant roof leak or something of that nature that we need to deal with, that's not part of this plan. We have to have dollars available to expend in those areas. In addition, our insurance deductibles are significant for certain things. So if we have a fire in our schools, that deductible is, in order to maintain reasonable premiums, is $500,000. We have to have the ability to pay $500,000 if we were to have a fire in our schools, which we hope we never do. But the dollars need to be in place. So at this point, we're expending up until that threshold on this plan and maintaining those dollars for emergent and deductible type reasons. So with that, if there's any questions for some of the items that are on there for Mr. Gorzitsa, feel free to ask away.
That $1 million that you keep in reserve, is that a figure you generally try to stick to year in and year out?
We have at this point attempted to do that. It may get more challenging as we go forward to be able to maintain that, but that's our target right now, is to maintain that amount.
Trustee Yegus?
Yeah, I have one question. I'm looking at this and it seems every school needs it, and I'm sort of interested to know, what does fire alarm mapping mean? Or fire, yeah.
Yeah, it was a health and safety issue. We have to post our maps where our gas shutoffs and our gas meters are and emergency exits and all that stuff. So they wanted a map displayed at the entrance of every school. So that's what this all is. So we started this a few years ago, and it's finally getting towards where they're completed. So it won't be long, and they should all be done.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Kimber?
Thank you. I was just wondering if playground upkeep with regards to like extra wood chips, that kind of stuff, falls into the IMR category.
I believe that it does cover some of them playgrounds issues for same reason, health and safety reasons, right? It can probably be covered under that, but again, is that just under general maintenance, or is it an IMR project? I think there is some IMR dollars, right, that we are allowed to spend on some playground stuff.
Yeah, not playground structure, but when it comes to a health and safety issue with the grounds, we have some leniency. Typically, they don't encourage it to be used for the grounds, but we can justify health and safety rationale around, the need for those types of things.
Trustee Toon?
Thank you. So is there a maximum amount of time that you can carry over funds for projects? Let's say something is from a year even prior to last year for projects?
No, there's no requirement by Alberta Education as far as timeline. Some projects are like when we report to the government, we actually report based on jobs completed and jobs outstanding. So the report goes through a software program that they have that we enter information into, and when we report to them, it's based on what we've completed. So jobs can be open for an extended period of time, but we attempt to, make the job so that they're based on components versus an overall job, so that we can close those off as they're completed. Things that we can't do, when it's a major job like a boiler replacement or something of that nature, well, then it's open until it's completed. But some of these, well, just to answer your question, no, there's no timeline required by Alberta Education.
Has there been any projects that were approved on previous years that have been a change in decision not to move forward with those? I know in the past it's happened where look at the project and it's of bigger scope, so you include it either in part of a future modernization or in another project that is to be approved later.
Yes. I'm just going to bring up on my computer a couple of areas that we determined for pricing reasons that we weren't able to do the job. Do you remember what those are right off
That was for the server room. We had some server room upgrades that we were going to do, but they went up substantially in price, so we decided we would just keep the old ones running as best we could. That was one of them, and then the other one was a Navy daily. We kind of had a stage enclosure that was on last year's list that we're going to wait to see how the mod directs us that way. So we took that one off the list. So.
Perfect. Thank you. One final question, Chair. I appreciate the health and safety things. I know that's paramount for making sure staff and students are safe. How much of those are brought on with the change of insurance requirements from being part of the new ARMIC group?
So I wouldn't say that health and safety, but from a risk management perspective. So if you look at the bottom, there's flow meters, temp sensors, those types of things are recommendations from the ARMIC. There are other recommendations that we potentially already had addressed in previous years. But through ARMIC, we'll continue to get recommendations based on best practices for insurance purposes. And yes, we do target those with IMR dollars, typically to complete. And so we actually also have inspections on a yearly basis for one of our schools that Marsh, which is the broker for ARMIC, will come and complete on our schools and give recommendations and things of that nature. A lot of the things that we've received are more on process versus, you need to spend these amount of dollars on this to fix this area. A lot of it is, like process, making sure we have a process that signs off on this and things of that nature. And so along with Laura, who's our health and safety officer, we're working on those and completing those to be compliant with what ARMIC requires. So not all of them require significant dollars because it's a process-based process. But yeah, there are things like the flow meters, temp sensors, and things of that nature that we use IMR for those recommendations. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to say thank you to the maintenance team. You do a phenomenal job in the school again this weekend, and hearing people from out of our community and in our community that haven't been in the schools for a long time come into the schools and see how amazingly maintained they are and how much pride you can see that it gets taken from the jobs you guys do. Just a big thank you for keeping those spaces such a welcoming, inviting space for our communities.
Thank you. It's good to hear that kind of stuff coming from other people. Yeah. And it's not always mentioned, but appreciate it for sure. My guys do a great job. Anyway.
Trustee Gember?
That was well said, Trustee Toon. I do have two questions. So follow up to my playground question would be, how do schools get on the list then to get their grounds refilled due to health and safety concerns?
Okay. So they have the ability to put in what we call a FAME request. Do we still call it a FAME request? Which brings it to the attention of the maintenance department. It comes through the administration of the school, and then it's prioritized based on those types of things. So if it's a health and safety scenario, usually it moves up to the top of the list, right? If it's a wish list kind of thing, then it may move down. But as far as what you're considering or what you're discussing, it typically would be a health and safety side of things, and they would be able to mark it as a health and safety within that process.
Perfect, thank you. And then the other ones with regards to West Meadow. They have had some ongoing concerns with a section just outside their school in the driving area where the water pools, and then it freezes in the winter and it is very slippery, and they have been sending letters to the town, so it's kind of gone back and forth with regards to who's responsible for filling it in. I'm just wanting to know if there's any updates. Does that fit on the IMR? I know I haven't brought it up yet, but it's been on the top of my mind for a bit.
And it's been an ongoing issue for a long time. When we paved it, it got a lot better there, actually. They did fill in that. That was 7 years ago, I think they did the paving there, which helped eliminate some of the water ponding and stuff there. It does run away a lot better. It was a lot worse before, especially around on the back side of the school there. It was pretty bad. So it's still going to be an issue. All the downspouts come down that side, and all the water kind of level out at the back of the school, right? It's hard to drain it. So, yeah. So I don't know. It's an ongoing issue at West Meadow.
So letters then that have been sent to the city or town of Claresholm, and they've been CC'd to us as well. Are you familiar with them?
Any of the letters that came from the town? No.
No, they came from West Meadow School Council.
Okay.
I haven't seen them either.
Okay. So how do we put this on an agenda to talk to you about later? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kimber. Trustee or Chair Poitras, do you have anything you want to say?
No, thank you. Just what I spoke to earlier, but I appreciate the conversation in the room.
Thank you. Diegas, would you like to make closing remarks?
I'd just like to thank Greg and everybody who's working with you for the wonderful work that you have done in terms of keeping our schools safe. And it's really great to see that happening. So thank you.
All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we're moving on to item E4. At 11 a.m. exactly, we will have a video presentation from Teton Science School. So we will try and get this through. If we don't, we might have to postpone part of this until 11:30. Is that all right with everyone if we follow that format? Thank you. College of Alberta School Superintendents. As it is now required for all superintendents in Alberta to be part of the College of Alberta School Superintendents, and because all other division office professional association membership fees in our division are covered by the division, the Board of Trustees will discuss the CAS membership fee. Can I ask someone to make that recommendation, please? Trustee Yeagas, thank you. The recommendation is that the Superintendent's Yearly College of Alberta School Superintendents regulated membership fee be paid by the division. Is there any discussion? Or Trustee Yeagas, would you like to open?
I would like to say that, first of all, if all other divisions are paying this, I feel that we should also support our superintendent and have his fees paid. Thank you.
Other trustees, please? Trustee Hodges?
Thank you. Mr. Seguin uses his cash membership and gets a lot of his professional PD from them. It is now a requirement at the CAS level, I believe, that they have to uphold their superintendent's regulations for PD. I believe that's correct. He's required to do so much PD to hold the superintendent status. And so with CAS changing to, sorry, what did they change to now?
Sorry, the CAS Act?
The CAS Act, yeah, sorry, it was never, they were never a CAS Act before, but now they're legislated in the government and they have changed some of the rules in there. So since it is now a requirement that all superintendents be part of CAS and also required professional PD, I am in agreements with this motion and would like to see it go through.
Any other trustees comment? Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I'd like to just start by saying I appreciate the CAS Association and all it does for supporting superintendents and specifically our superintendent's involvement with that. I think it really speaks to making sure that superintendents help support each other and mentor each other in their roles and responsibilities, and that it provides amazing PD. I don't think that that's something that can be questioned. In saying that, I am against this motion. This is something that the board negotiated as part of its contract with the superintendent to not pay these fees. That compensation was paid accordingly to not pay these fees. It was a discussion that came to the board after it was known at the time that the CAS Act was going to move forward and going to be in place, and that was something a previous board also chose not to support, to open up the contract to continue on with the way the current contract is set up. And I'm in favor of doing that, not including these fees, and would fully support this coming forward in the next contract negotiations being a part of that. I think that there's a liability to this current board that the fees have continued to increase and will continue to increase, and that it goes will obviously go above and beyond what the current contract is. So in light of all this, I'm against this motion.
Trustee Poitras, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. I really appreciate the impact that CAS has on our superintendent. I know that it is his most valuable PD that he does every year. And if he had the option of only doing one PD, it would come from CAS. And I appreciate the organization, the work that they do with ASBA and the collaborative effort we have going forward. While I understand Trustee Toon's points, I do recognize that throughout our division, we pay all membership fees, including ASBA fees for the trustees, ASBOA fees. For anyone else in our division who needs to be a part of an association, we pay those fees. And although I was on the board that previously discussed this, I do feel strongly that it is important to support our superintendent by taking care of these fees and letting him know that we support not only him following through with his PD and getting those requirements in, but also we appreciate the collaborative effort that he has when he goes with CAS, especially CAS 6 and other school divisions that are facing similar issues. I know that they come up with a lot of solutions together, and that's extremely important, especially in a rural division like ours. So I feel it's important that we pay these fees, and that's why I would be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Chair Poitras. Any other trustees with some comments? Don't make me laugh. Trustee Gimber.
Thank you. So I think it's very important that contracts are honored and they are created and written for a reason. I don't think we should be opening a contract up for something like this. I believe that CAS has lots of really good PD, like everybody else has mentioned, and that our superintendent does a great job of attending the PD that CAS has to offer. I am also in agreement with Trustee Toon's comment regarding the fees could potentially increase to an unknown level. So I would recommend an amendment to the motion, please. And the amendment would be just to change the word yearly to 2022-2023 College of Superintendents regulated membership fee. So that would basically mean that the fee for this year be paid, and we could reevaluate next year to see what the amount is.
All right. Would anyone like to speak to the amendment? Trustee Toon.
I appreciate Trustee Gimmer bringing this forward. I think that this is a great amendment because it allows us to have these generative discussions every year and talk about the changing conditions both in our division or in the province, and I'm fully supportive of the amendment.
Trustee Yeagas.
I'm against this amendment. I think when we talk about the increase of fees, we could talk, that could happen with any of the fees that we pay, with even the ASBA or Zone 6 or ASBOA or any of these. I mean, fees can go up. I don't think CAS fees are going to be changing any more dramatically than the rest of them, because of so I really don't think that this is a valid argument in terms of not accepting this.
Chair Poitras, do you have any comments? Hearing none, I'll ask other trustees. Trustee Toon.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been mentioned, Alberta School Boards Association fees, and that is not a comparable. That fee is paid for the board, and that is something we discuss every year, and we talk about the increase, and we vote on if we're going to support an increase or not, and that has been an increase of 0. And so to say that a professional organization is the same as a group that we can choose not to. We can choose not to be a members of the Alberta School Boards Association, and it's not for individual trustees, it's for the entire board. And there has been no increase in fees for the Alberta School Boards Association, but there has been with the CAS fee. So I think that this is important to do our fiduciary duty as governors, to not have things that are not overseen and that are automatic occurrences that if this motion passes, you're requiring another board to have a complete separate motion that makes sure that there's oversight into this, and we're just kind of putting it on the onus on other boards to make sure they're doing their duty, when this motion would make it a yearly occurrence that we have a discussion, vote, and move forward and support for it. So I really appreciate, again, Trustee Gimber bringing this forward.
Any other trustees? Trustee Yeagas?
I'd like to know, other than as ASBA in that I know we pay as BOA, but what other fees do we pay for professional groups?
Trustee or Superintendent Perry, can you comment?
The majority of the fees have been mentioned. There would be fees potentially for our psychologists and things of that nature in the FSL area that are attached to professional organizations. There's not many others that, but I mean, when we require anybody to attend something, we would pay the fees associated with whatever that is, the dues and fees. So unless anybody can think of any others. Can you think of any others?
Trustee Gimber?
While I agree that the fees are paid for other events or things, this is specifically included in the contract that was negotiated. So in my opinion, this is a one-off. It's an exception only kind of thing because there is a contract already in place for specifically a professional membership. So without this amendment to do it yearly, I wouldn't be in support of paying the fees because the contract was already in place.
The other trustees? Trustee Toon?
Yeah, again, we have one employee of the board, and it's our superintendent. We appreciate the relationship we have, and that is so collaborative. And so I think that these are important discussions that we should be having on a yearly basis.
Any other trustees? Although this amendment might seem like a Band-Aid, and I don't mean to use that term negatively, I think that, in my opinion, there's a lot more that needs to be discussed here by trustees, and I think the amendment is a good idea over the short term. Trustee Agus, would you like to make any closing comments?
I didn't make the amendment, so we're voting on the amendment right now.
Actually, then, Trustee Gimber, would you like to make closing comments?
No, my last comments would be my closing comments. Thank you.
Then I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? It's carried. Jeff? I appreciate all the vice chairs very much. I sincerely do. I'll say right here, the help that I've been getting from everybody has been amazing. So now we're back to the original motion. And I guess as the chair, I've already spoken to this. Trustee Agus, would you like to make closing comments?
Yes, I still feel that we should be paying these fees, and even with the amendment that has happened, I'm still in favor of it. I think it's important that we support our superintendent in all the things that CAS offers.
All right, just for clarification, that to everybody, as we vote, if you vote in favor of this, then you would have negated the amendment. And if you vote against this, then that would be, the amendment would continue, no?
No,
A little bit of help, Trustee Gagus?
what this does is that this is now the motion. It doesn't matter what happens. If we vote in favor, we're voting in favor of the original plus the amendment.
I needed that clarification. Thank you very much. Trustee Hodges?
Sorry, I just have a quick comment, and it could be just a friendly amendment to
No,
this.
point of order. Chair,
Go ahead, Trustee Toon.
you've called the question and asked for closing comments, so I'd ask that we stick
Oh,
to that,
I just
please.
wanted to add it to the work list.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. All those in favor?
Chair?
Yes?
Sorry, I would just also ask for a recorded vote.
Ms. Lewitton, are you ready? All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Trustee, or, sorry, Chair Poitras? Raised your hand? All right. It's carried.
I was raising my hand that I'm in favor.
Thank you very much.
Just because I couldn't see, do you mind reading out that vote? Sorry, I can see it on the screen now.
I'll read the, yep, I can read that out. The motion was carried. Yeah, only Trustee Toon was against. Could you hear that?
I did, thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll just take like a 2-minute break, and then we'll have the Teton presentation. Can you hear me? He'll be able to hear me. Charles, can you hear me? Charles, can you hear me? Charles, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Good, excellent. You're there, buddy. Just a couple of minutes. Everybody took a break. I think, or is Chad not going to sit in? Can you just wait 1 minute, Charles, please?
I sure can.
Snowing down there, I assume?
No, it's actually 65 degrees here in Dallas.
He's in Dallas, Texas, everybody. And when he was here in person, we had 2 feet of snow.
And it was -4. But I still had a good time nonetheless.
Charles, we'll go ahead and start. So I'm just going to read a little introduction here before you go. Teton is facilitating an initiative in the Crow's Nest Pass called Learning for Life, Ready for Change. This program promotes lifelong learning and community resilience. Horace Allen, Isabel Sallin, and Crow's Nest Consolidated all recognize the wider community as a place where contexts for learning can be developed and fostered. We have a wealth of expertise residing in our community that would be valuable if drawn into the school system. This place-based approach will initiate a community-wide engagement. Charles Campbell will give a brief video presentation about the program and answer any questions that we might have. Charles, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind. If you see my screen, let me get some thumbs up or say I got you.
Yep, we do.
All right, excellent. As mentioned before, I am Charles Campbell. I have the privilege to work with Teton Science Schools. And I want to kick things off with acknowledging the commitment of the group of Board of Trustees who is making this real over in Crow's Nest Pass and hopefully throughout Livingstone Range. So as I mentioned to you before, let's start off with some introductions. I'm Charles Campbell, and a lot of times when we travel, whether it's to the grocery store or to another town or another country, we are impacted by that place. And I've been privileged with the opportunities to travel around the world. And throughout my travels, it has broadened my horizon in terms of how I've come to understand people's thoughts, people's perspectives, how I've been able to connect with people because I immerse myself in their place. So you can see throughout my travels a potpourri of places. To your left is this artistic gazebo in Havana, Cuba, where they call it their art district over there. And I was mesmerized and stunned by the beauty of the art that you can see on some of the walls. And if you go through that, it looks like a little cave of sorts, was actually a art market where different local artisans sell their wares there. And there I learned the history of some of the religious cultures, specifically those of the Afro-Cuban population, and how they practice Hudan, or what we may call voodoo, in North America. To your right is the last remaining slave station in Colombia, Cartagena, Colombia. And I had no idea that they participated in the slave trade, but they did. And in this area, which I thought was amazing, with their architecture, you can tell the wealth of a person based on the style of their balconies. And I was just astounded in terms of, why did they think that balconies was a sign balconies and doorknobs were a sign of opulence. It was a real strange and fascinating thing. And they've kept up this area in tribute to the fallen people and how they have moved on from that. Above that is a picture of the Che Guevara monument in, I believe, is Herradura, Cuba. And again, from the context that what I've learned in the United States about Che and the work that he did in Cuba was vastly different from that what I've learned actually going to his monument. And then to your right is a picture of a mosque that I visited when I was in Abu Dhabi a couple of years ago. And this entire building is made out of marble, gold, diamonds, and all type of other precious jewels. You cannot walk in there with your shoes on. You have to walk barefoot. But this is the most pristine and cleanest place I've ever been to in my life. And I was just amazed by the architecture and the thought that went behind it in this design to revere their God, Allah. So as you can see, I'm smitten by place-based education, even though during my travels in years prior to me working with TSS, I didn't know that's what this was called. So having joined TSS, I want to let you know what our mission is. In the professional learning department, our mission is inspiring curiosity, engagement, and leadership through transformative place-based education. Our place-based education model is rooted within the context of this triangle. The core definition of place-based education, we would like people to look at it through multiple lenses. We want you to look at it through how you would describe your community. And then first start with self and then expand your understanding from a global context. This triangle is rooted in ecology, culture, and economy. The extension of this triangle and where the real crux of our work exists is within our model or our framework. And as you can see to my left, this is how we operate within our context of place-based education. Around the circle, you see our 4 components, which consist of the instructional piece, which is project-based learning. To your right, we recommend, but we don't tell schools or school districts that it is necessary. But to assess the learning that goes on, we recommend a competency-based form of assessment. Then buttressing that, we have our framework of character and leadership, which sits within the context of the work that we do with schools and school districts in their culture and climate or social emotional learning work. And then to your left is the real key to this mechanism is personalized learning. How do we make learning personalized for each individual student? I relish you all's theme, which is every student, every day. This personalized learning format fits within your mission of your students. Then centered as the core of this framework is our 3 elements: community leadership, intentional culture, and the driver of all of this is our place-based approach. Our place-based approach is operated through 6 specific principles. We are also currently working on expanding our principles, but right now, in our original conception, it exists with community as classroom, local to global context, inquiry-based design thinking, interdisciplinary approach, and learner-centered. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about what those individual principles are. But before we do that, I want to ask if you don't mind indulging me with taking a moment and closing your eyes and imagine your dream school and or your dream district. Just take a few seconds, think about it. And as you're thinking, let me guide your imagination with a few questions. What skills do your students have when they leave your schools? How do your students learn at these schools? How do your students think and feel about schools in Livingstone Range? How do your students engage and behave in and outside of school? And then lastly, what does the day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year look like in the schools within Livingstone Range? Now open your eyes. Feel free, anybody, to unmute yourself or drop in the chat your thoughts.
My first picture, when I first close my eyes, is I see a large number of students entering the school in the hallways, and I can tell that their lives are harmonious, they're happy, they're laughing, they're smiling, they're conversing with each other in a very positive manner.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else?
Sure. We just did our survey in our school division, and where it shows like safe and caring and all of that. And for most of all our schools, I think we rated really high in that. Not that there's not ever room to grow. So these are really great questions.
Excellent, excellent. Just to let you know, I didn't share this in my introductions, but I am education management executive, and I've been in education for 27 years, primarily within the Chicago Public School District and the south suburbs outside of Chicago. You name it, I've done it, from being a substitute teacher, education assistant, high school English and science teacher, assistant principal, chief academic officer, even worked on the district side, or what you all would say the division side, as well as on the board side as an assistant to the board, kind of like deputy board members. And even though in this work now, I'm still what I would consider myself a school nerd, right? You know, when I showed you those pictures, when I've traveled the world, I have to go see the schools in the countries I visit. And sometimes I've even taken the time and toured or spark up a conversation with the folks there. And even in this working with TSS, I've had the privilege to visit some of our schools within our network. And I'm all about testing the validity of our model, right? So, you know, when we pose this question, what is your dream school? When I go into our network schools and I visit the classrooms, I always like to spark and get conversations based on whatever the teacher is doing. And I have never been let down in terms of the responses I get out of the students. So much so, I inadvertently take over and begin teaching as if it's my class, because I can see when the work is being done with fidelity, and then that I see that the teachers get it first and they enjoy themselves. And then when I see and hear from the students that they understand what place-based is and how is developing their student agency, it's an amazing sight to be seen. So as you think through these questions, our job and what we aspire to do working with your schools is help visualize that dream school. And let me tell you, it can be a reality. So I say that as I preface going forward to talk about, we've all experienced the power of place, those moments when we're immersed deeply in experiencing the world all around us, and what's happening there is real and meaningful. Learning in these moments is organic, it's visceral. There's much to learn from the places we inhabit, from traveling across the globe to getting out into our communities. Yet, formal learning experiences that leverage the power of place remain the exception and not the rule. When I was interviewing for this position, I actually expressed a degree of guilt, because in my years of teaching and school leadership, I've done iterations of place-based education, but I didn't have a framework to contextualize the work that I was doing or that my teachers were doing. Having joined TSS, and now that they have a framework and a whole game plan, it's a game changer. Whether I stay or leave or retire, I'm always now going to be a apostle of place-based education. In my conversations with folks around the country, around the world, I'm always talking about how vital and how important place-based is, and try to encourage people, whether you're an urban school district, a suburban or rural, why you should consider place-based. And with that consideration, I would like for you all to take a few minutes and watch this video. As you're looking at this video, I want you to notice the agency, the elements of equity and community building in this video. And the video that you're going to see is one of our network schools. Can you all hear it? Is there more than one way to figure out how big an acre is? Yes. Could it be 2 feet wide? Right, it's gonna be really long, right?
What works for student learning is engaging kids with their environment. It could be about the local culture, it could be about the local history, it could be so many different things. But finding that inspiration in your community is key. When kids are engaged with a curriculum, they learn it.
Any questions? No. All right, make yourself, do it up.
What place-based education does is connecting learning to your own environment. Your own environment can look many different ways. It can be an urban environment, it could be suburban, it could be rural.
It can be the buildings of this place, it can be the landscape of this place, it can be the stories of the place. This year is Hood River County School District's 150th anniversary, and we decided that since our building is one of the most historic buildings in the district and we have some space, we decided to take the old ticket office and turn it into a museum.
It's really cool to learn about Hood River and Oregon. We started by making a timeline, and it's going to wrap around the perimeter of the museum. And then there's also going to be some major events that happen in the world. We're going to have a lot of World War II things here. We took a field trip. We walked downtown and Miss Siegel gave us pieces of paper that had pictures on them of what the downtown looked like back then, and we had to find where the locations were and then look at how it looked now. It's just a lot more interesting to learn about, and you really want to know because you can relate to it.
What do I hope the kids get out of it? That they get to better know their community, and they have a pride in their space.
Here in Hood River, we live in this very unique landscape, the Columbia River Gorge. So that was a really obvious place to start when we're talking about geology. How many layers are there? 3. There's been 7 catastrophic events that have created this landscape. And so you can talk about volcanoes, you can talk about lava flows, you can talk about earthquakes, you can see the different layers of rocks and the geologic history of time.
When we're done with this model, it'll display what the gorge looks like and how landslides have been carving the gorge. So the first layer, which is the clay, is the Ohana-Pikosh layer. The second layer is the Eagle Creek Formation, which is mainly soil. And the third layer, the salt layer, is made up of larger rocks. If you walk on some of the trails like Wachalla Falls, which we visited, you can actually see where the landslides could occur. When landslides happen, it's because of water weathering down. Those 3 layers get really moist and eventually erode. So now we'll model an example of a landslide when it rains. As you can see, the soil gets brought down, and sometimes the small rocks do as well, which leaves the Ohana-Pikosh bare. Okay. Sweet, it worked.
My hope for my students when they leave my class is that they can be stewards of the world that they live in. Place-based education is also the skills that you can use to understand the community that you're living in.
Being able to understand how you fit into a system is a really important part of middle school. And we try really hard to be able to get kids to understand what's their role and what's going on around them. That area, because that's what 1 acre is.
Okay.
We are in the process of studying fire ecology. There's a lot of fires that happen in our area, and we know that the reporting unit that they give us how big a fire is often in acres. We've also been studying algebra, and so we're using a 1-step equation here to be able to physically pace it out and put it onto the ground so they can start having a gut understanding of what an acre really is. Okay, so get the calculators out, figure out your pace.
Okay, do 100 divided by 45.
The whole idea was, let's do things that put math in context, and let's create problems that the kids want to solve, and then give them the tools math-wise to be able to do that.
Walk that way. How many steps?
200, because we did 400 feet. So.
I think what works for student learning is engaging kids with their environment. And how you define that environment is really up to the kids, the community, and the teacher. All of us need to feel like we're connected to something. Place-based learning provides kids with that home base, and now they can start exploring.
All right, does anybody mind sharing with me elements of agency that you might have noticed in this video? Student agency. Where did you see student agency in their learning process?
Sorry, you're looking for student agency. Can you just define the agency part?
Where you saw students actively engaged in their learning, you saw their confidence level in explanation of the processes that was taught by their teacher, their level of engagement with the work.
You could see the level of engagement throughout the whole video because they were in charge of doing it. So you could see that they were more actively engaged in it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what about that part when the young lady says, "Sweet, it worked"? Did you see the elation on her face? Now that's learning. That's probably what you saw when you closed your eyes. Anybody want to share elements of equity that they might have seen or community involvement that you've noticed in that video?
You do it.
The museum piece I thought was absolutely fantastic. That definitely involved the community, and along with that, the what it looked like then, and then how it looks now, going into the town and actually trying to find the place. Those are really cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. In communities like the ones you serve, you know, I know that there's the concern of what some folks call the brain drain or the bright flight. But just think about how we could circumvent that from happening to your communities when there's opportunities like this that happen where now students might have been involved with creating a museum or creating a town policy or something, and they can always look back and say, I did that, that's me, which will compel them when they leave to go to university. They want to come back and continue to contribute, but it was all sparked from day K-12 matriculation, right? And then too, I don't know if you also paid attention to, did you notice the demeanor of the teachers in there? Oftentimes we focus on the students, but what did you see about the demeanor of the teachers?
The teachers were excited and they let the students work through the issues or problems themselves. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I'm not working hard. I'm facilitating.
Yeah, I was going to say, Charles, yeah, they were actively involved. They were enjoying learning just as much as the students.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this, right? You know, we always want our teachers to do better, but we don't want to drain them. You know, if you look around our countries, whether we in Alberta, Ontario, or wherever, I'm sure you all are plagued with the problem that we have here in the States of teacher drain, high teacher turnover. Now I'm listening on talk shows and blogs. School districts here are now facing school leadership draining now and high school leadership turnover. I remember when I first relocated here to Dallas, Texas in August, and I met a couple of people who work for Dallas Independent School District, and they heard about my background. They was like, "Hey, we got a school for you. Want to be a principal again? I can get you in a matter of a week or two." And I was like, "No, that ship has sailed." But they're hemorrhaging leaders now. So what better way than connect them with practical solutions such as place-based that will endear everybody in the learning process? There's three things I want you to take away from this conversation. First is nothing new. Remember I told you in my 27 years back in the 90s when I was teaching, I didn't know it was called place-based education, or what I was doing was called personalized learning, or I was teaching in the principle of community as a classroom or local to global. But I knew it was something special because when I did it, I was able to create some sparks in my classroom. Secondly, it connects the learners to their communities and the world around them. I'm gonna be honest with you all. If I had more teachers during my K-12 matriculation who followed and taught me in this manner, I probably would not be here speaking to you in the position that I'm in now. I probably would be speaking to you all as a astronaut who had been across the galaxy and everything in search of life and understanding, because I had aspirations on being an astronaut. But because I did not do well historically in math, I cultivated a fear of math. I loved science, embraced science, excelled in science, but math, and when I found out that I had to have a huge math load in college, I steered away from it, right? But that's because I used to beg my teachers in high school, explain to me how a theorem is going to help me make money in life. What is so concerning that I need to understand Pythagorean's theorem? What does this mean to me, right? What the heck is a hypotenuse? I didn't understand it. I had one teacher in high school who helped me understand geometry. Well, I was able to pass geometry with the C because she connected it to sports. She knew I was a sports guy, so she made it real for me in that context. And that goes into the third point. Place-based is real. It's anytime, anywhere, and it's agile learning. And I should have put a comma in there and say it's also agile teaching. So as I told you before, I wanted to come back real quick and explain to you our triangle. Economy is what we consider the wealth and the resources, especially around producing and consuming goods and services. We say culture in terms of our triangle is that it's the shared patterns of behaviors that are learned socially. And the ecology portion revolves around living organisms and how they interact with one another and their surroundings. So as I mentioned to you before, this is our framework and our model. Our place-based approach is rooted within these 6 principles. And when we engage with the school, we allow the school, well, first we take the school through a self-assessment. And after they go through that self-discovery assessment, we ask them the pathway in which they want to take. Rather than us coming in saying, okay, Crow's Nest, you're going to start with design thinking. No, we start with where you are and your teachers are in their educational process, and then begin from there. And then whether it's a semester long or it's a year long, is how we progress to the next principles so that we can help cultivate sustainability. There's a new thing that when I joined this year, I want to make sure that we subscribe to. I'm big on data, and I want to know how well our schools are performing with proper implementation of our model. We started last year that every school is, we highly suggest and recommend that they participate in their own version of some sort of continuous improvement cycle to inform them of how well they're doing in their chosen pathway. So say, for example, if one of your schools in Crow's Nest Pass decided to start this semester off with local to global context, we would say that within the next 6 weeks, you should be checking up on how well it's being implemented, whether it's being implemented from an instructional standpoint, whether it's implemented from a curriculum standpoint, whether you're implementing to enhance your culture and climate, or you're looking to make it a part of your assessment process. We have recommendations on potential process to observe successful implementation, whether it could be a learning walk, it could be a consultancy protocol. We let the schools choose their manner. Or if you already have an existing model in terms of how you do your checks and balances to make sure things are being implemented with fidelity, we then attach it to that. But for us, we like at least twice a year schools conducting some form of continuous improvement cycle so that it will provide useful data for that school to see where they're doing well, or they need to make some tweaks in, as well as inform our coaches in terms of what we might need to pivot to or continue to do in your process of implementing PBE. Here's an example of a process in terms of what we do when we come in and we work with your teachers. We are big on providing resources ad nauseum. We just don't come in and tell folks what to do. We show you, we model, and we provide the necessary resources to be successful with your implementation. And here's a model curriculum page that we use when schools are interested in starting with maybe implementing it from a standpoint of starting with the place triangle. Now that I've presented to you the crux and essence of PBE, I'm going to ask you a few questions. First, what has been confirmed? 2, what misconceptions have been discovered about PBE in our TSS framework? 3, is there any new information to add? And lastly, are there any new wonderings? Take a moment, feel free again to drop your responses in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to tell me what you're thinking.
I agree. When you were talking about it at the, one of those, you said, this is not new, and I agree with you. I think teachers have been doing this, but one of the things I really found with this is that what you're presenting is that all teachers within a school are working on it. It's just not something that is done in a specific classroom. It is done throughout the school and through all areas of the curriculum, so that all programs, so that the students are learning basically a lot of the same things, but it's from a different viewpoint, which I think is very important, because I think that was one of the problems with this in the past when schools did it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We like to work in targeting what you just said. We do that through our interdisciplinary approach. And we can do that from either a grade band level or grade, or even within specific content where I believe one of your schools in Crow's Nest, I think it's the K3 school, there are some teachers who are just partnering up from a content standpoint. So that brings that connection, like you said, where we're not learning in a silo. That's an old Western way of education that current trends is kind of leaning away from it. In Eastern practices back in the day, it was, you didn't learn science just on science. You learn science in connection to music. You learn music in connection to literature. You learn literature in connection to math. Everything has a flow, right? As they used to say in Africa, it flows within a 360-degree cycle. That's where that interdisciplinary work, where students don't feel like, okay, this is just math. They're understanding how math exists in all things. Great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else?
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to sum up my feelings as we finish up here. I liked your comment that you made that when you were teaching, you didn't know you were doing place-based pedagogy. I was definitely a place-based teacher, and I didn't know it. So I got a kick out of that comment. I wanted you to speak to us today, Charles, because we have our associate superintendent, Cusack, who has been the champion for our place-based pedagogy here in Livingstone, and he's done an incredible job. And I think this is one step farther. And sometimes perhaps the problem is, as the governors of the system, we don't see this as a challenge. We don't see this as a task that we should be taking on. it's up to administration and teachers and so on. But in the Crow's Nest Pass, as a trustee, I have definitely been able to have some influence on what's happening there. And whether that's governorship or not, as trustees, we can motivate and influence what's happening. We might have to make sure we step back a bit, but absolutely we can have an effect on what's happening in the schools in our communities. And your program and what you've done for us has taken us one step farther from place-based pedagogy, which has been incredible in our school system, to getting involved with the community. And even in the little time that we've done it, there's already been several excellent activities that have taken place in the Crow's Nest Pass. And of course, I hope it spreads throughout Livingstone, and that's why I asked you here today.
Excellent, excellent. I'm so excited for you all. And hey, you haven't seen nothing. Wait till they get deeper in it. It's going to really blossom into something truly awesome.
Thank you, Charles. It was excellent. We'll see you in February, March.
Yeah, February. I think it's February. There's we're doing, I believe, a virtual event coming up soon in the next couple of weeks, but on site, I think it's going to be end of February, early March.
Excellent. Stay warm.
Thank you. Same to you all. I wish you all nothing but the best.
All right, partner. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope that was appropriate for everybody. So we have 15 minutes. We are on E5. Oh no, I know what I was going to ask before I forget. Trustee Hodges, did you want to make an emergent motion? It's been dealt with, looked after? Yeah. Okay. So then we are on E5. This is Board Policy 16. Trustee Yegas will review the proposed changes to Board Policy 16, school closures, modernization, reconfigurations with the board. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve of the changes to Board Policy 16, school closures, modernizations, reconfigurations as presented. Okay, thank you. You saved me doing that. Trustee Yegas has made that motion, and would you like to speak to it?
Yep. All had policy 16 in your package. We were asked to take a look at this policy as a policy committee and look at changes and bring it up to date, because there were some things within it that just didn't make sense in terms of what was in the School Act and what was happening. So we looked at various policies around the province and came up with the policy that we have, that you have in your package. So I am going to ask if there are any issues. There's just one thing on this. This is just a matter of housekeeping, but which I didn't even realize, and it was my fault. On the second page, number 4, board should be capitalized, and there should be posted on the Livingstone Range website. That is number 5. And D, be directly communicated to parents through school messenger or other. So, does anybody have any questions, comments, etc., on this?
Trustee Toon.
Can we bring up the copy that has track changes on it? I know it was difficult even in the package one. It just had the clean version of it. It's really hard when we're having discussions about what changes to see, and on an iPad to bring them both up side by side is really challenging.
Okay, if the whole thing was changed, this is not the same as policy 16 that we have in our current policies. What we did is we took another policy, we looked at it, and we decided that that best fits our current situation. And rather than reinvent the wheel, we use that policy. So if you want to have this brought up, all you have to do is go into the website and look at it, or look at the one that came within your package at the beginning of the year. There are very few things that are the same. As I said, the whole policy was changed.
Thank you for that explanation, because I was struggling when I looked at it to hear not having the rationale and background in the agenda. It just said that there are recommended changes. So in hearing that, I would ask that this motion be tabled to our December meeting, and that way our chair will be here, and if there is any changes that anybody sees in between now and then, we could approve it at our December meeting, if that would be agreeable to the board.
Okay. I guess we were hoping everybody was going to read this over, because this motion, or this policy has been, we've been trying to get this passed for about 2 months now. But I guess on that, I would like to ask if anybody has any recommendations or comments or anything else. Having read this over, is there anything that you would like to comment on, so that if we are going to make changes or do something, that we all can?
Any comments? Chair Poitras?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I am here and I have been able to be a part of the conversations. I was in this policy meeting when it was discussed. I do understand if people feel like they want to sit with it for, I guess, for another month, but I feel really strongly that the policy committee has come up with something excellent, and the new policy reads very well. So yeah, I would really encourage anyone who has any questions about different pieces of it to bring them up now, so we know what we're kind of pondering. But I also feel if the majority of the board feels comfortable voting on it today, I do feel that it's well written and fairly clear. We also had input from the superintendent, who was in that meeting as well and sits on policy. I don't know if maybe asking some questions of him would help with that clarity, but those are just my thoughts. I just want to let you know that I've been here and been able to hear the conversation, and I feel very comfortable with this policy and excited about the changes that are being made, because it just makes it much clearer and tidies up the process a lot. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Trustee Hodges?
Thank you. I agree with Trustee Poitras. I'm part of the policy committee, and we had huge conversation around this, and our existing policy just didn't meet our requirements anymore. It wasn't up to standards anymore. And so we did review a few policies in order and adapted it to Livingstone Range. I don't think sitting with this another month is going to make any difference. I feel like the policy that was put forth, it was in their package and able to read through it. And if there was any questions, this is the time to ask now. I don't feel like waiting another month to approve this is going to make any difference. So I recommend we just, if there's any questions right now, to ask them, and then we can approve it today.
Trustee Toon?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that this was in the package, and we can read what was in the package. There was no background provided with this, so that's where I'm struggling with this. And I'd be against approving this, and also for the fact that we're currently in the process of doing this and making changes to this. I agree that it needs to be up to date, but we have a community meeting scheduled for the end of the month, and in a few weeks, and it might be portrayed that we're trying to change the process in the middle of the process. So I agree that we need to update this, but I would be against changing this policy while we're currently going through this policy.
Trustee Yegus?
We have been having this policy on the agenda and talking about it, as I said, I think since we could go back and do the minutes, but into September and that, and so I don't think we could say that this is new and coming up right now, because we have talked in the past about changing the policy and and talked about it within our board meetings. So I feel that right now, if people have questions or comments or anything, there's not too much that you could do other than bringing this up to date and making it, as Trustee Hodges said, making this a lot more clear in terms of the steps we are supposed to take. I don't know how much more people want to look this over. I mean, that's what we were supposed to do within when we got our package. So I am looking for comments or anything that people have on this one.
Trustee Stankiewicz?
Just a question to the board for clarity for me. We usually, I think, discuss policy in a meeting of the whole prior to a board meeting, correct? Is that our normal procedure?
Trustee Yegas? What?
I don't know if sometimes we do, but this has been put on our meeting of the whole, but we always seem to have had no time for it. So, as I said, we've been looking at this for a while.
Trustee Hodges?
Sorry, I just have a question around protocol here. Because this policy is a significant change to our policy, I think we have to do 3 readings. And so this would be the first reading, and then it has to come back. So I think that because it should be a first reading, the recommendation is that this will be the first reading, and then it will come back again at the next board meeting. And we can do the second and third readings at that time, but it gives the opportunity to take it out to our school councils then. So I recommend that this be the first reading.
Thank you, Trustee Hodges. I forgot about those when it is a new policy, because that is stated in policy that we do it. So I think that would eliminate any of the concerns some of the trustees have with it. So I agree that this should be the first reading.
Anyone else? Do we need to vote on the first reading? Trustee Toon?
Yeah, I'm glad that we're now going to follow the policy of the first reading process, but I don't think that this eliminates the questions that I'll get when I attend Grantham School Council, and they'll ask, are we holding the process in Grantham to this current policy as soon as it is enacted? Because we will be midway through the process of doing our engagement and how that will affect the school community in Grantham.
Trustee Hodges?
Until this one is approved, we will have to follow the old policy, but I don't believe that this new policy will change the direction and how we're going to engage with with Grantham. I do believe that this clarifies the process, this new policy, so I do want to have feedback from the school councils on this policy, but I really do believe that it's not going to change how we move forward with Grantham.
Trustee Yegas?
And I totally agree with Trustee Hodges. I think that the other policy was a little more cumbersome and didn't really follow some of the things that the Education Act brought in there. I mean, some of them were just housekeeping things, but I think with this policy, it makes there's a lot of clarification in this policy. And I would like to have, maybe if Mr. Sequin would maybe make a comment on this too to help us with this.
Hit the wrong button there.
Yeah, I think we, as a policy committee, I think we just read over the policy that was in place and felt that it was insufficient, given the changes in the Education Act and just the feelings that the trustees had today in regards to school modernizations and reconfigurations and closures. Did a little bit of research out there around the province and found another policy, board policy, that seemed to match with the beliefs of the policy committee, and so felt that rather than making changes, so many changes to the old board policy, it would be preferable and more reflective of the trustees' intent, I guess, or beliefs around this, to adopt the new policy from a different school division. And so they did. The majority, the policy committee did take the majority, did tweak it a little bit to customize it towards LRSD. But yeah, I don't know what else I could add. Thanks.
Any other trustees? Okay, call the vote. All those in favor? Yeah, we're voting on the amendment. That the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of the updated Policy 16, School Closure Modernization Refigurations as presented. That was amended by Trustee Hodges. Is there any more discussion? Trustee Toon.
Sorry, Chair, for clarity, so if this passes, we'll again vote on the motion that it is first, this is for it to be first reading and then approval of the motion, or this is just on approving the first reading of it?
That's how I understand it. Trustee Yegus?
Point of order? Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
As Trustee Hodges was just clarifying, that the policy actually does state we need 3 readings, which is something we actually discussed in the policy meeting. So that was my mistake as chair, not putting that in the agenda, but it always should have been considered the first reading. So it's not actually an amendment, but this will be the first reading as our policy reads. A significant change to any policy requires 3 readings. So it's not an amendment. This will be the first reading. And therefore, if you are going to call the question, if someone wants to call the question, then we can just vote. Otherwise, Trustee Yegas should be able to close before we vote.
Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I disagree because we approved the agenda of the motion as read, that this is approved the changes to policy 16. It might have been the intent of policy committee to have this be first reading, but it wasn't approved that way on the agenda. So I think in order to do good process, we need to approve the amendment of first reading as presented by Trustee Hodges and then approve that afterwards.
Trustee Hodges?
I agree with that. I think because our recommendation came forward as not a first reading, we needed to make the amendment to show that it is a first reading. So I think that we should be voting on the amendment that I presented, that this be a first reading.
Trustee Yegas?
I will try. There we go. I will try again. Yes, we will do the first, this, I agree, this is an amendment because it wasn't in the agenda. And this will be the first reading. If we want other amendments in that, it can come with the second reading. That the next board meeting, we will do the second, and if we so approve, we'll do the third reading too. Okay?
Any other trustees? Is that your closing comments? I call the vote.
Trustee Stankiewicz.
Trustee Stankiewicz?
When this comes next and there's an adjustment that needs to be made, hypothetically, would we then approve it as a second reading with changes at that point? Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? Discussion? Call a vote then on the amendment. Do you want me to read the amendment again? That the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of the updated Board Policy 16, school closures, modernizations, reconfigurations as presented by Trustee Hodges. All those in favor? Against? Carried. Now we need to vote on the, all right. That the Board of Trustees approve of the changes Board Policy 16, school closures, modernizations, refigurations as presented. Trustee Toon, comments?
Yeah, just if we could exit the screen so we can see Trustee Poitras on, yeah, perfect. So we can get her included on the vote. Thanks.
Any discussion? Then we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Trustee Poitras, did we see a vote?
I'm in favor of a first reading.
Thank you. Then it's carried. Trustee Toon.
Thank you, Chair. I would just ask that my vote be recorded, please.
It's noon. We have F1 and F2 to finish. How do the trustees feel about continuing and finishing? I see a thumbs up from Trustee Toon. I see a nod from Trustee Stankiewicz. Is anybody on the other side opposed? Then we will continue. We are in discussion items, information items. F1, Mental Health in School Pilot Program. Associate Superintendent Richard Feller will provide an update to the board regarding the Livingstone Range School Division application for the Mental Health and School Pilot Program. Superintendent Feller.
Thank you very much. I feel like this is a day of celebration between our educational service agreements and what we're about to talk about today. There is no doubt that the work that the board has done in its advocacy for mental health supports to the province has allowed us to be in a position where we are the lucky recipients of the mental health pilot project grant. We received $630,900 to support our students in the areas of mental health. The goal of our project was to enhance the mental health, well-being, and resiliency, and thus the learning and achievement of our students who present with notable and concerning mental health and addiction needs. These students have traditionally been referred out to community agencies, but because we have in many of our communities, we were not able to have that support. We are now going to be able to provide that within our own system. The project as such is going to be working with Dr. Kendra Massey, clinical therapist Kent Hollingsworth, Palliser Schools, as well as Holy Spirit to provide professional development for our staff in these areas. Alongside that is to be able to hire sufficiently trained mental health therapists who are going to be working one-on-one with some of our most challenging situations. And so we're hopeful that we're going to be able to place some ads out in the next couple days to be able to retain those people that we're all fighting for throughout the South. And we'll be able to put some supports in place for our students very soon. We're super excited and appreciate all the work that the board has done in their advocacy for this. Are there any questions?
Trustee Toon?
Thank you. Really excited when we heard that this was announced. Just the question would be, was there any changes from when this first was proposed to when we just initially got approval for that?
It changes from what the objectives were?
Objectives, or if there was any changes from our first proposal to what recently was approved.
The only thing that we had to do was modify our budget. There was some things that we had unintentionally put in that were not eligible as part of the expenses. And so we were able to fix that. And within 4 days of that change, then we were approved.
Chair Poitras, do you have any questions? Trustee Stankiewicz?
Thank you, Mr. Feller. This is wonderful. What a boon for our schools. I noticed that the pilot program is over the next 2 years, providing research-informed development and clinical service. Just wondering how that will be, your budget will be allocated roughly percentage-wise, 40 or 50, or what kind of percentages are you looking at to allocate towards each piece?
The budget as such, I'll have to go into that specifically. In terms of direct clinical service, about a quarter of that will be put towards the supervision. The bulk of the grant will be to support mental health therapists, mental health therapists to work in our schools. That will be the bulk of the dollar figure. I can share that out with you if you like.
Great, thanks.
Trustee Hodges?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know this is a pilot project. I'm just wondering how the reporting back to the board, just so we can just see how everything is going. I know that it's for 2 years, so maybe at the end of the year and then again, or are you thinking maybe just halfway through? I don't know if there's like a process that you've discussed yet or not that you can share, or if that's something that's coming later. But I just am excited to see how this is going to work in our schools and our communities. And so for reporting back and understanding how it's all working would be wonderful.
Yeah, there's certainly some performance measures that we're working towards, and I think it makes sense that Holly Stewart, yes, she is here, that would be a portion of what she is responding to when she's doing a board report.
Any other questions?
Yay us, and yay and thank you to Dr. Massey and Lisa Furukawa, who put in inordinate amount of time in getting this grant ready.
Thank you, Superintendent Feller. We will move on to F2, Student Wellness. Holly Stewart and Dr. Kendra Massey, LRSD Clinical Team Leads, will present to the Board of Trustees regarding student wellness throughout the division. Welcome.
There we go. Let me just back up because I have a tendency, thank you, to chat as if you can't hear me when there's a microphone put in front of me, and I suddenly become much too loud. So I'm going to just bring my volume of my voice down a little bit from what I'm used to speaking at. And thank you for a few minutes to be able to speak with you today. wanted to review a few things about the 2021-22 school year in terms of our Family School Liaison Counselor program. I'm joined by Holly Stewart, our incoming and I guess largely currently active clinical team lead. And so this presentation is marking probably one of the last responsibilities that I'm taking on under the clinical team lead role. And it's a little bit of sadness that I highlight that, but do look forward to some continued work with the division. We're anticipating under the umbrella of the mental health pilot grant that we were hearing a little bit about this morning. So I have just a brief presentation here for you today. Probably take about 10 minutes to do a little review, leave a few minutes for questions, and then I'm hoping that means you might get to lunch. I'm not sure if that's your lunch break or not. I realize you've run over time here a little bit, so let's just get going. I just have a brief overview. We want to talk about the mission and vision of our division, how that's tied to our Family School Liaison program and the roles and responsibilities of our team. I'll share with you who's on that team, how the FTE is divided across our division, highlight some of the key things that our FSLs have been doing this year in our schools, and then just end with a few updates, most of which you're already aware of at the conclusion of our time together. All right, we're all very familiar with our mission and vision, and why I highlight it is because I strongly believe and see every day that our team follows and lives this out, especially when it comes to every student every day. It can be very easy and fun and rewarding to work with the kids that come in and sit and do their work and ask us questions and respond to our questions, and very much are easy to get along with. And one of the things I like to highlight that when it comes to the work of our FSLCs, they live this mission out every student every day because they do it with some of the kids that are the hardest to like, the hardest to get along with, the ones who don't give us relationship in return. And they do that because they understand that when we can have relationships with our kids, when we show our most challenging kids and our concerning kids that, hey, you matter to me, I have time for you, and I'm going to be here with you no matter what's going on for you. That's the marker, or that's the piece that's needed for change in the kids' lives. That's what brings about relationships that are easier, more enjoyable, and more rewarding. But I do want to highlight that because this work is not easy work that our FSLCs take on, but they certainly understand that it's the meaningful relationships that are important that allow us to carry out our mission of every single student and every day. So let's just review together the purpose and the focus of our Family School Liaison Counseling Team program. So you see hear me shorten it to FSL or FSLC just because that other one's a bit of a mouthful. Generally speaking, we like to have everybody, students, staff, kids, understand that our FSL program is about optimizing the learning, the development, the well-being of students through some work that we do with them. And we anticipate that the work that we do with them is going to reduce or prevent some of their challenges. And I will speak to what some of those challenges typically are within our division. We meet this goal through three main types of service. We do a lot of direct counseling work. So this is scheduled or drop-in visits with family school liaisons in each of our buildings, where different counseling activities, everything from coloring together to having a conversation about what's going on and what a student can do to support their goals can take place. There is a lot of consultation and collaboration with our FSLCs that involves our administrators, our learning support teams, parents, professionals in the communities. These are conversations that are done with each of those individuals to be understanding what's going on for kids, but what each of us, what our staff, what parents, what coaches, what administrators can be doing to support their usually well-being first, and then following that, their learning. And then lastly, our FSLs are involved in many types of group or classroom programming. This can be everything on suicide prevention to a grade 10 class, to a friendship group with grade 3 kids who are struggling to learn how to make friends and maintain friends over the school year. And to highlight, these 3 services are provided directly to our students, often to our school staff, which is our teachers, our EAs, our CUICWs, our administrators. It's certainly to families, and which is typically parents and caregivers. And then, as I highlighted, we are involved with consulting or communicating with community professionals or programs to make sure that when we as a school can't support all of the needs of our kids, we are supporting or assisting families in accessing the appropriate services outside of the school building. All right. I'd like to highlight just a little bit about our team, and I want to say what an amazing team we have, and I don't use that description lightly. I very much believe we have probably one of the strongest teams, certainly in Southern Alberta, because of the training and the background of our team, their knowledge, their dedication to the activities within and outside of the school building. We are very, very fortunate to have recruited into our small communities a number of FSLs that really meet the needs and work very closely and very easily alongside myself and now Holly to be providing the activities under the FSLC program. So we are a bit of a diverse group, except for when it comes to I would say sex or gender, where they are all females at this point. So this has been no choice of ours, but mental health, especially with children and adolescents, is predominated by female staff, and that is what we currently have with working with us. But they are diverse in terms of their backgrounds. So we have FSLs who have college degrees, undergrad degrees, as well as master's degrees in different areas: child and youth care work, addictions counseling, social work, and then counseling psychology. Our FTE remains unchanged from 2021 at 10.26 FTEs, so just over 10 full-time staff. As a reminder, if you're curious where those staff are working, here is the FTE allocation at each of our schools. So 0.8 would reflect 4 days a week. The orange is a shared FSL between Grenham and WA Day, and the green is a shared FSL between Isabel Sellen. The other schools have their own specific FSLC. Think a little bit about the common student challenges and concerns that we see throughout our school year. Without a doubt, kind of the top 3 or 4 that our FSLs are responding to are stress and pressure, whether it's academic stress and pressure, friendship, family. Usually the kids walking into our rooms have some type of stress, pressure, also known as worry for some of these kids. Can often be connected to relationship difficulties, whether that's relationships with their classmates or peers. It may be family relationship struggles and concerns. Across our schools, we see frequent referrals for emotion regulation and behavioral challenges. So kids who struggle to understand and regulate their emotions in an age-appropriate way, and then often have behavioral challenges, whether it's more disruptive rule-breaking behavior or more withdrawn and quiet behavior. Typically, we see those behavior challenges, though, because of difficulties regulating their emotions in age-appropriate manners. We often see a large number of kids, especially within our junior high and high schools, who seek support for things around self-concept, self-esteem and identity, things that they are working through. Also, especially in our high schools, we see concerns related to mood, and I would say often low mood of feeling sad, down, low energy, and depressed. And sometimes, but not always, we can see suicidal behaviors, including self-harm and suicidal ideation that can come along with mood difficulties. So knowing the challenges, here's often the focus of our FSL work. And again, this is direct service. This is consultation with parents and community professionals and work with our educator teams. We have a big focus, and this often is the focus of our group programming on mental health education. What is mental health? What is mental illness? When might we want to pay attention to what's going on in our lives? When would we want to talk to our friends about what they're seeing and who we might want to go to if we see certain difficulties in ourselves or our friends? A big focus across the ages, so kindergarten right up to grade 12, is on emotion regulation. That can be supporting kids in understanding things that they can do to feel better day to day. But often with our FSLs, it is about regulating alongside of kids, being with kids when they're going through intense emotions and getting them back into a place where they feel calmer, more comfortable, and able to get back into the learning environment, which is typically the classroom. We have a lot of FSLs doing work on peer relationships, how we can form relationships with kids and how we can maintain those relationships with our peers. And the final two big focuses of our work with kids or with students is on character and self-esteem building. And we also take on crisis response activities, which will be various types of assessments and safety planning when, for example, kids have made a threat of an act of violence or aggression against another child or threatened to harm or hurt themselves. So we have just a little bit of data for you, again this year, to give you a sense of the amount of work that our FSLs are doing within our buildings. I do want to highlight that these numbers are an approximation and likely, and very likely, an underestimate of the number of kids that our FSLs are supporting. I would also like to highlight that when we get to the individual work with kids, this is individual work where consent has been provided. This does not account for the kids who drop in for one visit, that the FSL support in the hallways, that the FSLs are supporting maybe in small groups in the learning environment because the teacher has asked the FSL to come in and help for a day, for example. So we have at least 90 groups were given across our division. Groups, classroom presentations, or clubs. When we look at the 90, approximately 23 were single presentations given by our FSLs. 23 involved 2 to 4 sessions with kids or youth. 23 were 5 to 8 sessions in length. And there were 21 groups that ran on a very routine and even weekly basis across the school year. The most common focus of these groups and presentations or clubs was on social skills, similarly relationships, mental health education, emotion regulation, and self-concept and identity. Here's the data on individual services. Again, we want to highlight that this was consented work, and I would estimate that probably our FSLs connect with at minimum, I would even say probably 30% of our kids on a fairly direct basis. But this is consented service, so there was roughly 14%, almost 500 kids across our division that received individual services. The primary area of concerns, first, as I highlighted earlier, anxiety was the biggest reason that kids sought service or they were referred for service. Social relationships was second, then ADHD, trauma, and some suicidal behaviors were the 3 remaining top areas of concern when kids were referred. Following that, the most frequent focuses of service was on behavior support, emotion regulation, which are tied together. We can't remove those two things, and on social skills. So looking at this and understanding, you just heard about our successful pilot grant application. This is all just a review. Some of the highlights that you'll again probably hear next year, but we were excited to have Holly join us as clinical team lead. We also like to highlight that we've hired since the end of the last school year 3 new FSLCs into Matthew Halton, Canyon School, and Livingstone School. And we're excited and I believe each one of those came with a master's degree in I think each in counseling psychology, if I'm not mistaken. So very, very solid additions to our team, and we're very, very fortunate. 2 of our FSLs over the course of the summer largely completed the very rigorous and challenging task of becoming a registered psychologist. This is Holly Stewart, who's beside me, and also Marley Duncan, who is an FSLC at FP Walsh. But we're very excited and proud of these accomplishments, as they are no small feat. And then lastly, which we just finished talking about from what I saw as we came in, we were successful with our grant application of roughly $630,000 over the next 2 years to be providing additional mental health services within our building. And that word additional is key. These are services that are new and go above and beyond the services that we've provided, and we anticipate will meet the mental health needs of some of our most with some of our students with some of the biggest challenging mental health or learning needs. Okay. Let me see. That's enough from that side. So that brings me to the end. I think it was probably 15. Can I open it to questions for a few minutes here?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Massey. Any questions or discussion for Dr. Massey? Trustee Hodges?
Thank you. Thank you for updating on us all this. We know it's most important to meet the kids where they are. And so having people in the schools and the buildings at the time the kids need it is super important. And so I'm glad that we have someone in our schools at a regular basis anyhow. And we welcome Holly in the addition to our team here. And so, and I'm just excited about the grant, and like I said, and seeing how it can benefit us even more than where we are, and the updates that'll bring. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Trustee Yegas?
Yes, I know how important family liaison workers are to a school. When I was principal, I depended on them a lot for the help. And so thank you for getting such a group together that really helps the students and everything, because as I said, I've always considered them to be an integral part of the school, just as great as the janitors and the principal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Stewart. Dr. Massey, very much. Appreciate it. Wonderful information.
Sure. But Ms. did you want?
Yeah, just a quick question. Just you can see the distribution of the staff around the division. We know there's some places that have a little more high needs based on socioeconomic status, as we've been presented in the past. Are we seeing the same amounts of the number of students needs in the smaller schools? Are we in the largest schools proportionally? Like, do the bigger schools have more challenges than the smaller schools? Just a question that when we were touring our smaller schools the last couple of weeks, that came to mind as a trustee, is the smaller schools have more familiar, so their students are possibly working out issues together, as opposed to some of the bigger schools where they don't have the close contact. Just something
It's a good question. I don't have we could certainly get data to look at whether the proportion proportion of referrals, the number of kids serviced is similar or varied across the schools. Just speaking off the top of my head, though, we certainly see that the needs can vary by community. So a smaller school in a higher needs community is going to have more referrals, more work being done. And so some of our higher needs schools, for example, would be Fort McLeod is one of our schools. We're both at the elementary school and a high school. I don't know that the numbers would necessarily say it, because a lot of the work that ends up being doing is some crisis management and responding to immediate needs. So we might attend to something and then move on and not engage in fully consented service that's of an ongoing nature. But we certainly see that across the division, varying with different things, including socioeconomic status, cultural background, poverty, the needs can vary. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just a follow-up with amazing. We're so excited about the pilot program. We're going to continue to try and advocate the government for make these things sustainable and so we can have them in place going forward. If that's unsuccessful, if the government doesn't choose to fund past the pilot program stage, what are some takeaways that you could see benefiting from us piloting this in our division?
Lovely. Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the takeaways that we're hoping to show is that by providing mental health services to kids who require a higher level of service, who require frequent, repeated service that I would say falls under the therapy umbrella, that when we provide those services in the school, we can provide a service more efficiently because we're meeting kids in the environments where they're already at. We remove transportation and financial barriers, and we can then therefore provide more efficient service. So I think that is one big takeaway, that we're hopeful to show that by not having to refer kids into the community to Alberta Mental Health and Addictions, we can actually increase the amount of services that are being provided and remove the pieces such as no-shows that are due to various things, including an inability to attend for financial or logistic reasons. Yeah.
Any other trustees? Well, Ms. Stewart, Dr.
Okay.
Massey, thank you very
Lovely.
much.
Thanks, everyone, for having us today.
All right, so apparently we do not have anything for in camera. So let's do our three key messages. Trustee Hodges?
Thank you. I have three. I don't know if the board, and we had a postponed one from our previous meeting. So I do have three if the board would like to use them or not, but I'll just put them out there. Oops, wrong page. I put down the mental health pilot, board policy 16, which we need to share with our school councils, and the service agreement is what I had. So not sure if everybody agrees with that, but those are the three that I had.
Sorry, Trustee Hodges, what was the third one?
The service agreement with the Métis, I don't know the whole title there, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Okay, yeah, Métis Nations Education Service Agreement.
Any comments from the trustees? Everybody's in agreement with that? Excellent.
Trustee Toon?
Trustee Toon?
Not with the key messages, sorry, but would it be possible to go in camera for a quick 5 minutes with just the trustees after this?
Are you going to make a motion for a temporary adjournment?
I would ask for a motion to go in camera.
So moved.
Thank you.
At 12:36.
At 12:36. Thanks, Brad. I don't know it written up, and then we weren't going to go on camera.
So you want just trustees?
Yeah.
Did you say? Okay.
My notes.
Is Lacey gonna?
Do we have lunch, Nikki?
Yeah, is Lacey going to?
We can put her on the phone if she's still on. I couldn't see if she was still on.
Stay in here and then they, oh.